Hey everyone, welcome back to Beyond the Numbers. I'm Josh, and today's episode is one that, for many of us, might hit us pretty deep. Some of us might have experienced what we're going to be talking about today, and unfortunately when we experience it, it has a way of shaking us up and sometimes even messing us up. Today we're talking about how you lead through betrayal, loss, and hurt. As I've stated with many episodes, this isn't a bash fest. We're not here to name church names and drag them through the mud or anything like that. Instead, we're here to be honest about our pain and what we've experienced, but even more honest about the healing that God can bring through it. For me, I've been cut deep by churches, by ministry. And if I'm being completely honest, the truth is, if it wasn't for God calling me into this ministry and walking alongside of me and continuously giving me strength to move on, knowing that I'm chasing after His calling, if it was not for Him and more for people and their praise and their attention and everything like that, if I was doing ministry just because I was doing it for the adoration of people, I would have quit a long time ago. It is only because of God and His call that I still continue to pursue this and still have the same passion that I had, if not even stronger than when I first started. Today's episode is for those of us that have been overlooked. Maybe you've been used or manipulated, just cast to the side, and yet you still show up. You still lead, and most importantly, you still love. Let's dive in as we go beyond the numbers. There's a lot that I could say about this episode, a lot of stories that I have to share, and some of them that I've shared with other people over the course of my lifetime in the ministry. And then there's other stories, other hurts, other experiences that I've never really voiced before. In fact, if I'm being honest, this episode came together as a way for me to start processing some of those old hurts and old wounds that started rising up again within me. And yet in the midst of all that, there are all those things that you want to start pouring into, or at least I did, into this episode. But then I also had to be aware that it's very easy for grief to take over the microphone. Bitterness has this way of, when we start preparing this, sneaking in and starting to preach. And the truth is that I don't want any of that, because again, this isn't about focusing on the hurt. It's about sharing the hurt, but most importantly, sharing the other side of that hurt. While we talk about hurt and betrayal and broken leadership, what I really hope that you gather and walk away from in this episode is not the hurt and the pain and think, well, it's just another church, it's just another thing of bitterness, but that instead, the thing that receives the glory, the thing that receives the spotlight, is how God can take those broken pieces and create something new, something better, and how most importantly, He uses these processes that we've been through, if we allow Him to refine us and to create within us something new and something greater. Over the years, I've served in many different kinds of churches, from high production churches to small town ones. Over the years, I've also experienced many moments within the ministry that helped shape and form me. And if we're honest, I've also experienced a lot of moments within the church and within the ministry that nearly broke me. For instance, I once served on a team and under a lead pastor who refused to do my daughter's baby dedication. No real biblical reason. It was just he was hurt and they were hurt because me and my family were moving. And so because of that, they refused to do it. We were erased as a family. As I shared in the last episode, there have been moments where I was told that I need to be more polished to stay more on brand. Not that anything was wrong with the preaching, not that anything was off doctrinally. It sounded great, it was crisp, it was clear. I think the exact words were, I just need to dress more appropriate, put on my big boy pants, is what I was told, in order to attain the look that the brand was after. I've been praised one month and punished the next for the same exact thing. And every time I kept on running into these issues and being so confused about what was wanted and what was needed, I started questioning and asking myself that question that we asked at the very first episode: is this what the ministry was meant to feel like? Some churches told me that I was hired on to be the next lead pastor, where everything that I was done was groomed for those roles. And as I got better and better and more publicity and more stage presence, the goalpost kept on being moved farther and farther and farther back. They would give me platform and visibility and love to use me because of my young age and the way that I spoke and the way that I used scripture. And in front of everyone, there would be those smiles. And then behind closed doors, I'd be torn apart for the same thing. I'd be ripped apart because my wife wasn't visible enough, because I was too young, or because my kids were too goofy. I once served under a leader who would mentor me one week, and then the very next week would use that mentorship to manipulate me. They'd offer me guidance and then punish me for following that same exact guidance that they were giving me. Why did you do that? Who told you that? Promises were made to me and my family. And we're not talking small ones. We're talking big promises. And then when the pressure was on, they didn't uphold their end of the bargain. They didn't uphold the promise that they told me. And so while leadership in front made everything look well, behind the scenes, me, my wife, and eventually my kids were left holding the baggage and holding the weight. And yet, even though the leadership didn't stick to their promise, they still expected me to give the output above and beyond what was originally called for. I've been applauded on Sundays and then discarded behind closed doors. I've had transitions where I was asked to stretch the truth just to maintain the brand, to maintain the cohesion of the team. I've also, in the midst of all those things and at different churches, had friendships which I thought would stand the test of time and would last forever, and yet in a flash, overnight, my history and my friendships were completely erased. And yet in the midst of all that, while that can be weighing and almost depressing, and some of you are listening and maybe it's stirring up some of these old feelings, some of these old memories that you've had, and you're like, this is not a happy thing that we're discussing here. This is not, a joyful moment. Yet despite all of that, I've also seen how God can redeem all of those things. I've seen how in the moments of despair, when me and my family didn't know what was going to happen, random people rose up and God, sparked something within them, and they provided in ways that her family to this day are still blessed by. I've seen how healing comes in those uncommon moments, in those moments that we didn't expect. In the midst of all of that, healing starts to take place. God starts to work on those things, and you find that even the scars that you have can tell a story and can be used to change lives. When I was originally starting the idea even for this podcast, I was doing lots of research, and one of the things that I started doing was asking in different church groups and around different pastors and online communities, what does church health look like? And there were a lot of great ideas and a lot of great creativity, but can I tell you, one of the main things that kept on jumping out over and over, a majority of the posts would talk about dealing with betrayal, dealing with hurt, dealing with that knife in the back when it comes to ministry. The truth is that this is an episode I wish I didn't have to create. But seeing all that and being a part of it, I know more than anything, this is an episode that's needed. The reality is that many of us have experienced that hurt, have experienced that betrayal, and the worst part is we've experienced it in places, in jobs, in teams that we thought were safe. See, the Bible, it talks about how as Christians, we're supposed to expect attacks. We're supposed to expect persecution. And so this isn't like something where I'm like, whoa, where did this come from? Everything's supposed to be like hunky-dory. No, we expect that. The thing is that we expect it from the world. Many of us were not prepared for those attacks and that persecution to come from our own ministry teams and our own home churches. I think that's why that church hurt cuts so much deeper, because it's tied to trust. It's tied to calling, and for many of us, it's tied to our identity. And when we have those things taken away, when we have those things ripped apart, it feels like the very ground that we're on is unstable. For many of us, there's different areas where we've experienced these hurts or this toxicity or this unhealthiness within the church. We see it in things that happen behind the scenes. Trust that's broken behind closed doors. Where in front, everyone's told to wear this great mask like everything is great, but the minute that the doors are shut, the team is ripping each other apart. They're tearing others down. The smiles turn into daggers. We also see it where loyalty is demanded of the team, but then it's not reciprocated. How many times have we been part of a church where we need to be there to protect the church, protect the image and the brand of the church, and yet the minute there is one single complaint from a parent, one little tiny insignificant thing happens, and suddenly we hear the thump thump as the bus is running over us. We're expected to be loyal, but when we need it, we're just run over. Another big unhealthy thing that we see is when leaders are platformed for their charisma, but meanwhile there are others that are punished for their character. We're seeing this more and more in the exposure that's going out of the churches, where there are leaders that are being revealed to be living in sin, be actively living in it. And yet there are choices that are being made by teams to keep everything together, to cover up those things. Why? Because that person brings in the cash. Why? Because that person is the ministry and they have so much charisma and so much energy and people are growing through them. So because of that, we cover over things. We cover over the sin that they're living in and the fallings that they've had. And meanwhile, those that call that out, those that whistleblow, those that use the correct biblical principles and how to deal with those things, well, they're cast aside, they're ripped apart, they're torn apart. Why? Because they're not that person. They have character. Part of the problem is that sometimes we see a manipulation that happens emotionally, and yet it's dressed up as spiritual maturity. We've seen that before, where others are like, no, this is what it means to grow in your walk. You have to battle some of those feelings. And don't get me wrong, like there is a level of discipline that happens in our growth with the Lord. But oftentimes there are those leaders and those churches and ministries that use that growth as a way to manipulate others. And so you ask them to do uncomfortable things. You take advantage of them in different ways. And we dress it up as spiritual maturity. Well, you're just not there yet. There's also the lie that a lot of us have been told before, that this is what the ministry requires. And so we're told to sacrifice more. We're told to give up more. We're told to cover over things or sugarcoat things because that is what the ministry requires. When what is really happening is they're really saying this is what control looks like. It's not an excuse for what the ministry is. It's an excuse for people to control churches, ministries, and teams. Then there's the quiet traumas that happen. We lose all of our friendships because of a transition. Those moments where you're told to smile on the outside, and yet everything inside of your heart is in pieces because of the way that you, your family, and others have been treated, or how the church sees those. They wear that mask, they wear that smile, but more than anything, it's a performance. Or there's the quiet trauma of realizing that your family wasn't really cared for. They were more of a prop, not really a priority. It can feel like it is an uphill battle. And what hurts is when you realize that it's not just one isolated incident. But as with this whole podcast, there are many churches that have allowed this toxicity to continue. And that is the goal behind this podcast, is creating those healthy church cultures that really seek after God. And so you feel like you are battling when you go from one church to another, and it's a different location and the same toxicity. But here is the truth, and that is that there is a shift that is happening. Because betrayal doesn't get the last word. God is the one that receives the final word. For me, I've learned through great pain and experience what a healthy environment and what a toxic environment really looks like. And one of the things that I do now is I look for those green flags. Those things that show me, okay, this is a healthy environment, whether it's a church that you're attending, maybe it's a church that you're at, or maybe you're in an interview phase and you're like, what are some of the signs of a healthy ministry here? Some of those are signs that look like leaders and a team and a church that treats your family as a gift. I'm not saying that they have to take special priority, but they see your team, they see your family, rather, as a gift to the ministry. And because of that, it's something that they want to continue to grow and continue to help be healthy. Another sign is when they have transitions that are in place. When it's you or another pastor or a leader that is moving to a different ministry or a different location, and the transition that happens is one that honors the legacy and your story. I've gone into different youth ministries and different churches where I see some pictures of, the previous youth pastor and students as they did like a baptism thing or an outreach or whatever. I don't see those things as attacks against me. If that youth pastor built a healthy ministry and they transitioned for all the right ways and in the right reasons, I've actually kept those pictures up. I've kept those around the campus. Why? Because that is part of the church, the youth ministry, the ministry as a whole's legacy. And I'm not about erasing legacies. Let's celebrate those things that God has done and not wipe it away just because someone has gone to a new church and fulfilled a deeper calling that God has for them. Another green flag that is major, and we've discussed it throughout this entire series, but that is when you are part of a team that encourages honest feedback. When you as a pastor or a member of a ministry team can talk in a healthy way with your leaders and your leadership, and they encourage it. They want that growth. Even if they don't address anything like that, there is honest feedback. Instead, what most of the time happens is we're afraid of repercussions. Health looks like when we can have those conversations and know that there are not going to be repercussions for us opening our mouth or sharing those things in a healthy way to the right leaders. In this culture, one of the biggest green flags I look for is leaders who showcase humility, who name and own up to their own mistakes. Oftentimes, nowadays, many leaders will blame and shift the focus for their mistakes. Humility goes a long way. And even for me, I try to replicate that to my team. Even if it's a small thing, like someone's like, oh, you never texted me back. I can make up every excuse, but sometimes it's really, I just missed it. I just wasn't paying attention. I dropped the ball. And so instead of trying to make up excuses, sometimes I'll just be honest with them and be like, listen, I'm really sorry. I dropped the ball. I missed that text. I missed that appointment. And I'm sorry. Could you please forgive me for that? But owning up to our mistakes, being humble. And in this culture, I think one of the biggest things that's needed, one of the healthiest signs is when no leader is irreplaceable. And yet in the same aspect, no one is disposable either. And what I mean by that is this. There is no one on that platform that we consider 100% protected. Meaning, if a pastor were to fall in a major way, we know that there are guidelines and there are expectations that are in place. And if they have sinned in a major way, they're not protected. We need to deal with it. And in the same aspect, no one is irreplaceable, meaning when there are those that talk about these things or draw attention to these things in a healthy way, they're not just discarded. They're not just thrown away because they're living a life of good, healthy, moral obligations that God wants us to have. The truth is that I think as a church, we should realize we are a visual example of Christ to the world. And so because of that, we are called to a higher standard and a greater level of responsibility. And yet, sadly, what we've seen too many times in our current church culture is that we've saddled right alongside the world and have held ourselves to their standards instead of God's standards and the biblical standards. There should be something major within us to realize that we are examples of Christ. And so because of that, we are called to a greater standard. Being his image bearers, we need to start acting as his image bearers. In this process of green flags and trying to find health, I've learned to even ask different questions, more important questions when it comes to interviews or meeting other people or joining up with a ministry. Asking questions like, what does healthy transition look like? One of the biggest questions is, why is this role available? Sometimes that'll give you all the details you need to know. Why are you hiring a youth pastor? I understand now. Or maybe asking them how they handle grief. Or what does the leadership style look like for the staff? Or are they shepherded? Or are they just kind of like lorded over? So it's great to talk about what health should look like. But for those of us that have experienced those hurts, those of us that are wounded leaders, what are the action steps that we can be doing now to start creating that healthy culture? I think one of the most important things is to allow yourself to grieve and process the emotions. This is something that we talk about with our students. Not bottling things up, but being able to process those things. And the truth is as adults, we battle with the same thing. And sometimes as a ministry leader, we feel like we have to bottle it up even more. But the more we bottle it up, it's closer and closer to the point of explosion. Allow yourself to grieve. Allow yourself to process what you've been through. And then write it down. In some way, in some form, record it. Not like as evidence against people or to harbor that hate and that anger, but to write it down, to remember it, so that way when you're put in those positions, you don't replicate the same thing. Some of us, we've been wounded, and if we're not careful, we can carry those wounds to other people. There's a saying by someone a whole lot smarter than me, I just don't know who it is, that hurting people hurt. And if we don't process the emotions and the hurt and the grief that we've been through, and we don't remember those things, then oftentimes we carry that hurt and then move on and bring that hurt to others. The very same thing that hurt us, we use against other people. Another action step that you can take is when you realize that in a church environment, boundaries have been broken. It means setting up new boundaries. When you go into a new ministry, when you're working at a new place, setting up and building boundaries that weren't respected. Sometimes it's boundaries that we never thought we needed. But once they've been crossed, we're like, oh, now I know where to set a new boundary. And so those things that weren't respected before start drawing up those new boundaries. And sometimes it may look like boundary after boundary after boundary, and that is okay. Another thing that I started doing as an action step was journaling or recording or in some way remembering what values are important to me. So that way, when I go to a new place, when I work in a new ministry environment, or as I start leading within a ministry environment, I have those values so I know this is what I'm looking for. This is the ground that I want to set. If I'm looking into a new ministry, I have those values, and those are the very key, the very paramount thing. And so because of that, I'm looking for those ministries that allow that, or they exemplify those things. And to me, when I see that, I'm like, okay, this is where I know I want to get plugged into, because our values align, our vision aligns. Another thing that we can do is we can replace self-blame with reflection. It's very easy to look after a situation and be like, wow, they were 100% in the wrong. And sometimes they are. But when we look back and reflect, sometimes we realize where they were in the wrong, but also where I kind of was in the wrong. There are some of us that we will put all the blame on everyone else. There are also some of us that we will put all the blame on us. And oftentimes, that's not the case. And so it's important to look back and reflect and see, okay, what percentage of this was me and what percentage of this was them? And then from that, what can I take away? What can I learn? And what can I make different next time? But it only comes when we're honestly reflecting. And then I think one of the healthiest things that we can do as an action step is to create a plan of transition. In a perfect world, maybe we will be at a healthy church forever, and that's awesome. But it's always good to have a transition plan in place and what that looks like. I've tried to do that at many churches, and there were some churches that loved the fact that I had a good, healthy transition plan in place. Why? Because I didn't want the ministry to fall apart because I wasn't there. Because at that point, I built a ministry that was all about myself, my personality, and not about God. And so for me, it was important to build a level of transition so that when I wasn't there, when I was no longer part of the ministry, God could continue to still work within our students, within our leaders, within everything like that, because something healthy was already built into place. I've also worked at churches where they kind of took that transition plan and just threw it out the window. And if that's the case, then that's not on me. But we have to do the best we can to make sure that there is a healthy level of a transition plan in place, sometimes beforehand, even if it never comes. But that way we know we have done the best to steward what God has given us. And maybe there are some of you that you're still in that unhealthy place. Like you realize the toxicity of the environment that you're in, and for whatever reason, you can't leave that environment right now. One of the things I would suggest is for you to start journaling what you're seeing. And the reason that you do that is because it's very easy for others to gaslight us. It's also easy for us to gaslight ourselves. To look back on something and be like, oh, was it really as bad as I remembered it? Did that really happen? And start questioning some of the experiences that you knew you went through. I've had it before where leaders are like, that never happened. And it was 100%. It happened. There were videos of sermons where things were said. And then they're like, no, that never happened. It's important for you to journal the things that you see so that you don't have others gaslight you, but you also don't gaslight yourself. Another piece of advice is, or an action step, I should say, is to seek advice before you deal with any confrontation. There are some times where I immediately, after I was wronged or hurt or whatever, like anger, upsetness, righteous anger rose up within me, and I was going to go confront and deal with them. And luckily, I had some good mentors that I could go to and talk to, and some of them were like, yes, this is 100% something you should talk about, but let's cool back from the way you were going to approach it, or let's leave these topics off the table and do this in a healthy way. And sometimes they save me from embarrassment to myself or creating worse situations. So always seek good advice, good counsel before dealing with confrontations. And one of the important things that you can do if you're in a season and at a place that you know is toxic, is to still continue to draw those lines, those boundaries, both for your physical, your emotional, your mental well-being, and if you have a family, for theirs. Even if it's for a season, redraw those lines. Remind yourself, your team, about those lines. Because those are some of the very same things that can save you as you push through this toxic environment that you're in. Then there's the other side of the audience. Those that you have experienced this pain and yet you haven't been able to heal yet. Maybe that pain is so fresh you haven't even started that process of healing, or you're in a place of complete brokenness. I know a lot of pastors who have completely walked away from the ministry because of different hurts and things that they've experienced, and they're still in that process of healing. Or they've yet to even start that process because of how much that pain hurts in such a deep level. The anchor verse I want to go to is a story that sticks out to me when it's come to the different pains that I have been through and the betrayals that I've experienced. And it's the story of Joseph in Genesis. And Joseph starts off by being given this dream, these amazing dreams. And he probably does the wrong thing with it, brags about it to his brothers and his family. But it says that his brothers start hating him. And then they hate him even more because of his dreams. There's actually a point where they're setting him up to kill him, and then they sell him as a slave. But they say, in what will come of his dreams? Their goal is to destroy his dreams. And then Joseph goes on this path of feeling like he's farther and farther away from his dream. And every step forward he takes, it seems like there's 2 steps back. He's sold as a slave, and then he works for this guy Potiphar, and everything seems like it's starting to look good there, and then he's accused of something awful even though he took the right path out. He stood against sin and temptation, and yet because of that, he's thrown into jail. While he's at jail, he flourishes there, and then he finds the right connections and helps share something into a couple of prisoners' lives, and there one of them is exalted back to his place near Pharaoh again, and yet he forgets about Joseph again. Fast forward a little bit, and Joseph ends up saving Egypt and beyond because of a dream that God gives Pharaoh that Joseph is able to interpret. And with that, Joseph becomes second in charge of all of Egypt. And eventually, when this famine hits, who comes in for food but Joseph's brothers? Joseph is the one that they end up coming before to get food. And there's this reconciliation that happens, but fast forward to the end of Joseph's father's life, and the brothers are terrified of what Joseph is going to do because of what they did. And in Genesis 50:20, Joseph says this: "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." He addresses them. What you meant for harm, we're not excusing what you did. What you meant for harm, God has turned around and used to save hundreds, thousands, if not millions of lives. There was a healing and a maturity that had to take place in Joseph throughout that entire thing. But in the end, he says, even though you meant harm from it, God turned it around and used it in a powerful and a mighty way. All of what Joseph went through was used to position him at the right place for the right purpose. For me, God used everything that I went through to shape me. To shape me and my priorities. He used some of the betrayal that I went through to create good, healthy boundaries and to build a backbone, to a degree, within me. And more than anything, whether it's my blisters in my skin or the church hurt that I went through over the years, he has used those wounds and those scars to speak life into leaders, as I'm doing now and as he's allowed me to do time and time again before. You don't have to hide what has happened or what you've experienced. But here's the biggest thing, is that you don't have to live there either. One of the things I want to challenge you in a process of healing is to create something out of the brokenness. For me, from the different things that I've been through and gone through, as a way to process those and as a way to turn those things around, God sparked within me the idea for this podcast. And as I've said before, if one person listens to it, then it's for that one person. But for me, I needed to create something from those things that I went through so that I could use it continuously for God's purpose and God's glory. What better way than to take the hurt and use it as a way to build health into hundreds, if not thousands of people? For you, it may look like you creating a book, a story, a journal, a video, or something, maybe a teaching or a sermon or a ministry that does things differently. But whatever it is, create something out of that thing that was meant for harm. Another thing that you can do is pursue reconciliation. And I realize the minute we say that, you're like, I don't want to step back into that environment. I don't really think that I'm ready to talk to that person. That person isn't even on this earth anymore. And so it's very hard for me to do that. The truth is that reconciliation might not happen by actually talking to those people. But for those of us that have been through those things, we know the weight that we carry and the hurt and the brokenness from what we've been through. And so that reconciliation might look like you forgiving them without ever talking to them, but choosing to release that weight that you've been carrying, that heaviness on your heart, the pain that you've been through, that you've allowed to sit there, choosing to release that to God and releasing the debt that other person has accrued within your heart and within your life. And then the final thing to help us in this process of healing is to surrender it to Jesus and allow him to redefine you, your ministry, your purpose, and most importantly, your success. You're not behind. You're not forgotten. Whether you're in the ministry still or you're out of it, whether you're in the midst of the toxicity or whether you've gotten clean and away from it, allow God to start repurposing within you those things that you've been through, to see them turned around for His glory, to turn around the hurt that was caused within one person and use it to save and direct others to God so that thousands are changed through it. If you've been hurt, betrayed, overlooked, taken advantage of, or maybe something else beyond, but it was done by people who should have known better. Let me say it again, as I've said in many other episodes, you are not alone. This is not the way that ministry should be or was meant to be. You're not crazy, but also, God willing, you're not done. God still uses broken vessels, but uses them in even stronger and better ways, especially those who have learned to depend on Him and not on the rest of the world. If there was something today that stood out to you, you might not want to share your whole story, and you don't have to, but I would love to know what really stuck out, what really made a difference. If you've been through hurt, betrayal, and loss, and you have a story that goes along with it to show how great God is and how He can refine those things within you and made it even better and touched and changed lives because of it, I would love to know. I hope that in today's thing, it wasn't a bash fest and it wasn't so depressing, but you walked away with something that you can start allowing to be a change within you or a change to others. If there was something that stood out to you, do me a favor and share this podcast, share this episode, maybe with a friend or someone else within the ministry. Or maybe it's the other side and you're experiencing that hurt. That my challenge to you is to take 5 minutes today and pour out that hurt to God. Next week, we're going to go back in time just a little bit. We've all learned different lessons being in the ministry over the years. Some of us have learned it from others, and some of us have learned it from our own mistakes or failures or different things of that nature. But the question we're going to be asking is, if I could go back in time, if I could talk to my young self, what are some of the lessons that I would teach my young self? What are some of the things that I've learned over the years that I would remind them about or share with them? Or the things that I knew my former self was carrying, the weights that they were carrying, that I would let them know, you don't have to carry those things. What would I tell myself years ago that I know now within the ministry? It's about being change and bringing change. And hopefully for some of us, we will walk away with lessons that we learn from others instead of having to make those same mistakes ourselves. It's an episode that I don't want you guys to miss, and I'm sure you don't want to miss, so that we can learn and grow together. Until then, I challenge you to take a deep breath, lead from your scars, allow God to work through you, and keep on going as we work to go beyond the numbers. Thank you. And at this point, they don't know. Oh my goodness. And at this point, they don't know that Joseph is the one that they're about to get food from. They receive food from him. If you've been hurt, betrayed, oh my goodness. If you've been hurt, betrayed, overlooked, or even beyond, if you've been hurt, they're doing work outside.